Yes, good afternoon. Is Aaron Brown in? Okay. Well, I have a question if you could relay I'm watching on Google, actually reading about her interview with Mr. Lieutenant Michael Studin in regards to human and sex trafficking. Well, I have some great information and I'm going to share it right now publicly. I've already shared it to YouTube. The perpetrators are right in his own yard. Vermont State Police, Human Services, and all of them involved in trafficking my daughter. And I'm not happy about it, and I'm making the story go nationwide. I've been telling Channel 5 and Channel 3 about this for 15 years. And now we have a case of sex trafficking and then human trafficking. That is a result of what happened to my daughter through the hands of Attorney General T.J. Donovan and Vincent Aluzzi, the state's attorney general, the state's attorney for Essex County, Guildhall, Vermont, who used to be senator, along with Northeast Kingdom Mental Health Services. We have a whole story that happened, detail, information, proof of facts, and all, that led up from my daughter being fully capable of being a mother and taking care of all her responsibilities, to having to deal with being abused, and then the cops didn't do anything about it. However, they took her son away from her, they locked her up in a mental institution, and then she ended up missing. She was taken off a Greyhound bus, and this is all because of TJ Donovan trying to cover up his own bullshit. So I'm letting you all know the story is nationwide, and I also let you know that I spoke with a gentleman at this news station the other day in regards to this. When my daughter was listed missing in Rutland, she was found, but he didn't want to do anything about it. So I have a case number on that as well. The man that answered the phone with WCAX, and he's on audio record, and he's already shared to YouTube because he knew he was on audio record. He was very vague, he was very rude, and he was very disrespectful. I had a daughter that was listed missing, and he didn't want to hear about it. So therefore, what's that? I don't know. He was an older guy. He didn't reveal his name. He only answered the phone, newsroom. And so I don't believe that that's adequate either. He should have said who he was. And like I said, I've shared him to YouTube. He is on my YouTube page. He knew the story, and I have every reason to believe that WCAX blocks stories that have to do with what the government and the state officials, as well as the police in the state of Vermont, are doing. And I can prove to you from a recorded hearing back in April that the state of Vermont police frivolously charged myself. Okay? I have facts and proof of that. The judge has already said that I was proven to have not done what I was charged with. And then they continuously try to charge me because I've spoken out about the fact that they put my kids into sex trafficking and human trafficking. And the people that are in charge of that are Border Patrol. And it was Homeland Security Border Patrol agent Jeffrey Hare from Island Pond, Vermont. He was found to have abused my daughter twice in a DCF record because his wife coerced and lured my daughter from her 8th grade classroom to an IEP plan. She was the teacher, and her husband being Border Patrol, and then my daughter ended up in their custody. How? I was a fine mother for 14 years until they met Mary Hare and Jeff Hare. And again, the paperwork is out there and it's shared to video on YouTube. The fact is, my daughter was sexually abused by Border Patrol agent Jeffrey Hare out of Island Pond, Vermont, Homeland Security, and they continuously tried to traffic her and destroy her as well as myself to cover their own tracks. They allowed my daughter to be abused. It's all on YouTube, audio recorded, the abuse. They never charged the perpetrator. They came back and they took my grandson away from my daughter. And they charged her. Now, to keep her quiet, they took her to court yesterday. And she doesn't even know what the charges are for because they happened back in June when they took her son from her and she was suffering from a medical breakdown, okay? So they got her in this courtroom yesterday trying to find her to be incompetent is what her court-appointed attorney, who is also a conflict to her interest because she's violated code of ethics with a client, all right? So with that being said, This woman's trying to encourage her client to be incompetent and go to a psych ward instead of facing charges that we have proof that she didn't do. And that woman's name is Laura Wilson. I want her looked at, and I want her to be publicly mentioned because she's no good. She violates her clients. She's violating my daughter. My daughter wrote her. Yes, my daughter is her client, and she won't help my daughter at all. She's trying to encourage my daughter to do an incompetency test and prove herself to be incompetent instead of being able to go forward and face the judge. And that's not cool. You don't tell your client to try to be found incompetent and go to a psych ward instead of facing charges that are frivolously put against you. That's just wrong. And this woman, Laura Wilson, the attorney, she happens to be part of the appeals board for the federal court. So that's a violation and a conflict anyways, because my daughter and I had filed in federal court against all of them. So therefore, she shouldn't even be, it's a conflict of interest. Not only that, but I filed on behalf of myself and my daughter yesterday for protection from harassment against TJ Donovan, Vermont State Police, and more, because they have abused us so bad. My daughter's name is Brianna Knights. She's right now in Burlington Hospital, and not one person has gone to take any credibility and get her statement about the sex and human trafficking. She was so deathly ill, they tried to make her even more ill. They shot her up with medications that she should have never been shot up with for 60 days on an involuntary hold for a gag order to keep my daughter silent to try to cancel our lawsuits against the state of Vermont. And now she's in the hospital. She's trying to get medically better, and I'm going to tell you what happened. My daughter went missing after TJ Donovan had her locked up in the hospital, okay? She went missing. It's all on audio record, all shared to YouTube. She went missing. She was found October 8th, near dead in Daytona Beach. She shouldn't have been in Daytona Beach, but she was kidnapped off a Greyhound bus. They found her in Daytona Beach at a hospital. Then she was entered into the missing persons report at a Daytona Beach because she went missing again. December 4th, November 28th or 29th, I was contacted by Vermont State Police telling me that I had to go to Florida and make medical decisions on my daughter. Okay? And then they turn around and put a no contact order and a warrant out for my arrest because I had contact with my daughter after they told me to go make medical decisions. Now, this is all frivolous acts that they've tried to conspire and keep my daughter and I silent and not speak about what's happened. So, knowing that she went from missing in Daytona, found to be in Orlando, so beaten and bruised and burned up that they had to call me to make medical decisions. She couldn't speak. She couldn't do anything. She's about 30 pounds less than what she was. She does not look the same, but she's coherent and she knows what's going on. I nurtured her all the way, and she got back home to Vermont. I got her as far as Maine, and she wasn't feeling well at all by the time the trip was over, but Northeast Kingdom Mental Health Services, directed by TJ Donovan, tried to get my daughter on a bus, a 47-hour bus ride from Florida to Vermont, and promised my daughter that they would have a place for her to stay, get her son back to her, and all that stuff. Well, first of all, knowing that she had just gotten out of the hospital the same day that they were trying to lure her to go on a bus like that over New Year's weekend, no money, no clothes, no food, knowing her medical condition, that to me is human trafficking. Because if it was somebody else promising her that stuff and she did it, they'd be charged with trafficking. Well, that's what Northeast Kingdom Mental Health Services, Human Services, is doing, is trafficking people. My daughter included. So I nurtured her all the way back to Maine, and then they contacted her from Northeast Kingdom Mental Health Services, the same ones that are trying to get her to go on a bus from Florida, found out that she had just been in the hospital again, and they put her on a bus, an overnight bus, made her stay in New York City over the night with no clothes, no food, no money, and then put her in a motel where all these crimes started. So again, that's going to cause PTSD and emotional distress. They're all a setup for failure. I send you people everything all the time on this case, and nobody will do anything about it because it's media bias, obvious. But you can look up House for Justice, Kim C. House. Look it all up on YouTube. You're going to find that I put every bit of this out there. You're going to find missing Bree. You're going to find out there's a 21-minute statement written, speaking with the detective, the sex trafficking cop down in Orlando, Florida, that took the statement and assigned a detective. I've got Channel 6 Investigates that has extensively tried to get the records and reports, and they refused to give them even to Channel 6 Investigates. But they were going to do a story on it, and WCAX was refusing this whole time. Yeah, because it's a conflict of interest with TJ Donovan and the Vermont State Police, because y'all do a bunch of coverage for them, but you don't cover the stories about people who are being abused by them. You only cover the stories about people that are considered criminals doing acts against the police. You don't do stories about these Vermont State Police and senators and law officials that are actually violating us. Like TJ Donovan, he's an abuser himself. He punched a guy in the mouth and defamed him. Defamed his character for the rest of his life. And now he's the Attorney General? Look at Jansen Wilhoit. Jansen Wilhoit was in prison and now he's adopting kids? How does that happen? You take kids away from their parents and say they're no fit, but you give them to somebody like him? You think he's not going to suffer from backlash if he was raped? He cries rape in prison, and he gets up here, and now he's a big part of Vermont? He was representative for the state? How is he going to be emotionally supportive to kids if he was raped? Isn't that why they take kids away from their parents, is because they've got emotional trauma, PTSD and stuff? I know that's a fact. So why are they turning around and giving them to the senator? He shouldn't have kids. He went to prison for embezzling, and he never, not the senator, but the old representative of Vermont, he never paid back any of the money to his clients. So they're all schema and scam artists. I was running for state representative. It was in the paper, November 23rd of 2019. 3 days later, my mail was sent back to return to sender to the federal courts, where Burlington Post Office is right underneath the federal court. I never got my mail, but it got returned to sender, canceling my lawsuits and my right to file and run campaign, even though I had already signed my paperwork. The Vermont State Police allowed somebody to steal my house and my car off the property that I resided on, canceling my right to campaign. That's called stealing the election, don't you think? So with all that being said, I asked the same question. Why doesn't WCAX report? Well, then I give you the answer. It's because it's media bias. They are representing the government and the state. They don't want their dirt to be out here. They don't want to be exposed. Bernie Sanders years ago put in his report that he doesn't like women and that we deserve what we get when we're raped. That's all in the news. Yeah, please do. My name is Kim, and when I tell you I've sent copies, I have sent multiple copies. Every time I do a YouTube that includes Vermont, I send it to WCAX. Nobody wants to report.